Well, who's doing the introduction? Is it me?
Go for it.
All right, Matt, Chris, this is it's an honor really to be here with both of you. I've admired both of your work for a long time and for as long as I've been doing my podcast, which really, it's not that long, it's less than a year, but I've been watching podcasters for a lot longer than that, and I came upon both of your work, and it's just really inspired me, your presentation, but um, more so how you hold yourself. And then I realized both of you have children. And I've just watched and admired how you handle your responsibilities as fathers while doing this work. And this work isn't for the faint of heart. It's not light duty stuff. Sometimes or often we get into the deep end on some pretty heavy matters. And Matt, I've seen you just take time aside and kind of put the podcasting on hold, or just kind of pare it down to your midnight. How does it go? Monday Night Master Debaters,
You got it.
the best name of all the podcasts
It
out there.
is good. Yeah, that's good.
And just spend time with your son and getting out there and coaching. And that's such a high level commitment for a father to take on coaching a baseball team. And seasons go on for 3-4 months, and I've seen you put videos up there of him pitching and his unique style of pitching, and cracking the bat, and just I just think it's awesome, and watching him follow in your footsteps, and that's been really inspirational for me. And Chris, what, I'll be honest, what really inspired me to reach out to you both, and hopefully this is the first of many such podcasts where dads in the podcast sphere get together and talk about the rest of life, or at least a significant part of the rest of life, fatherhood. And Chris, when you had is it a son and a daughter?
I've got two sons and a daughter, 10 or 8, 10, 12 are the ages. The daughter's in the middle.
Great. Okay, so you had, I guess, one of your sons and your daughter on a podcast with you. I forget which city you were looking at and dissecting, but you had them on and just exploring alongside you, and just the wonderment in their voice, and I just thought that was amazing. So that was what inspired me to suggest that we get together and talk about uh, fatherhood in the age of insanity, as Matt aptly put it.
Yeah, I think it's important to instill that thirst for truth in the children, instead of robbing them of that, which is what we're trained to do. I think it feels that
Mm.
way in the society.
Well, and to be able to ask questions, right, Chris? I mean, that's one of the things that I think is most critical, is instilling in them that it is okay to question. It is okay to ask why, and if you don't understand something, or something doesn't feel right, just because someone else says that's the way, you have to be strong enough in your own ways to say, okay, well, we may disagree, but I want to look at it more. And I want to dig a little deeper into it, instead of just saying, okay, well, I guess he's right, I'm going to just believe whatever he says.
Yeah, following the crowd, right? We don't want to encourage following the crowd. We know where that can lead you,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah. Yeah, we've gotten a heavy dose of that recently, and instilling in the kids a sense of critical thinking. Well, and it's really hard sometimes to thread the needle, because I've tried pulling my kids out of public school, and I have a lot of respect for people that can manage homeschooling. We tried it, and it ended in tears. It was tough. We got, again, three boys, 2.5 years apart. And it was just it was good for a little while, and then it just, they have different needs. They're at different levels. They're brothers. They don't want to sit still already, and then let alone sit still for mom and dad in each other's midst. And it was, now, I'm trying to run a full-time design business from home, and make ends meet, and all that. So we pulled the plug on it after, and of course this was during the beginning of the COVID lockdowns and stuff, and we didn't want them on the laptops and doing that whole thing. So that's what precipitated it on our end. But after a while, we just, we kind of, I don't want to say we caved in or gave up, but I guess on a level we failed at the homeschooling adventure and put them back in public school. And so then it's like threading the needle there between like teaching them to be critical thinkers, question authority, not just, accept what they're being spoon fed, while also doing their homework, being responsible students, caring, and doing the best that they can with, the opportunities that they have. So it's tricky.
Yeah, we were tempted to do the homeschool thing too. A lot of our friends went down that route, and there's talk of it here too, starting a school outside of the system. But I talked to my three young ones now, and they're really looking forward to seeing their friends, the friends that they've made in those relationships, which I think is actually the most important part of school. Maybe the positive part of the school system is the fact that all these young children of a similar age can gather, and get to know each other. But you're right. You have to, they do walk the tightrope. There's still all sorts of agendas, let's say, afoot within those systems that we have to be aware of, and we have to push back on, I think, a lot of the time too, if we don't agree with it as parents, right? And a lot of parents will just go along to get along, and that's how it seems to grow some of those things.
Yeah, I'm becoming infamous at my son's elementary school because anytime there's something that I don't agree with, I will let them know. And I, offer that I am more than willing to come in and talk to you about this. And it actually came to a head this past spring. My son was in 4th grade, and they sent this big long letter home because by law they had to, because they were going to start teaching them about sexuality and hygiene and, puberty and things like that. But then at the end, they threw in gender identity, inclusiveness, and one other, like something to do with race. And so I had no problem with the top half about, teaching them how to use deodorant, brushing their teeth, good stuff like that. That's great. But then when you start getting into those are more political ideas. So I pushed back and I wrote a big long letter how I didn't agree with it and my son wouldn't be participating in it, and that I would like to see what they were presenting to the kids. And so it was great because I went in and sat down with the nurse, and I have never seen a woman more scared to say the word penis in my life. Like she turned ghost white when she had, and I said, because she wouldn't say it at first. She was going through the presentation and she stopped and she skipped over and she goes, "Oh, you get this." I go, no, say it. I said, if you're going to say it to my son, yes, you have to be able to say it to me. And I said, I don't see any difference between you presenting this to kids and presenting this to me right now. And so she said it, and man, every time I made her read it out. And it was one of those where, all in all, after looking at it, it was fine. The whole gender identity, that I don't know why they put that in there, because it wasn't even part of the program, wasn't part of the presentation. But I went in and they know now, anytime they do anything, they're going to hear from me. And because I would rather be overcautious when it comes to things like that than regret not stepping in before it happens. And I think at that point, you're holding them in check a little bit so that they know, hey, at least someone's looking out for the kids. And we're not going to just totally be able to slide anything in there without someone looking it over. And, I feel I have no problem being that guy, because I am looking out for the welfare of my son and the kids in my community. And I don't think that by introducing political ideas at a 4th grade level that you're doing these kids any justice, and you're doing anything but brainwashing them. And I don't think that's the point of school. I understand the history of our education system and what it's based on, and it's meant to create workers and obedient people. But at the same time, you can be respectful and be disobedient. And they find questioning and holding them accountable to be disobedient. And I have no problem with that. You're not being rude, you're being respectful, but you have to hold them in check. Because I think today, especially in today's day and age, you give them a foot, they're going to take a yard.
Absolutely. Where are you, by the way, Matt?
I'm
Where do
in
you?
Massachusetts,
Oh,
rural
wow.
Massachusetts.
So the other side of the continent, and Matthew and I are over here on the western side of the continent in different countries, yet we're seeing the exact same agenda rollout.
Yep.
Mhm.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, Chris, you're my calm anchor up north. Matt, I listen to you when I want to get riled up. You're my East Coast. But you're absolutely right, Matt. And how old is your son?
10.
10. I mean, yeah, there's certain things that just shouldn't be on the radar of a 10-year-old.
Well, and I can judge that, right? Like I know
Mhm.
my son very well. I mean, I take pride in the fact that, that's my number one priority. But we watch television and we're watching a program where two adults kiss or two teenagers kiss, and he's still at that age where he's like, oh man, I can't see this. What is going on here? And it's like the most disgusting thing.
Yeah.
And so I understand and I know when it's going to be the right time to be able to talk to him about certain things. And I think the push on sexuality on young children has an adverse effect in the long term. And I think that's part of this underlying agenda that we're seeing where, now we're not just people, we're also what our sexual preference is, right? That's become secondary to our name almost.
Mhm.
And I don't think that's natural, right? I mean, we're people, we're all, and what you do behind closed doors, fine. I have no problem with it as long as it's between consenting adults. Do what you want to do. But when you start bringing it and pushing it on people, then it goes from something, turns to something more. And
Yeah.
I'm not okay with that with anything. I think anytime anyone's trying to push something on everyone, it has a negative effect.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I think, Matt, you put your finger on the core issue. And, it's so easy to get kind of like sidetracked in these cul-de-sacs of antagonistic points of view about this or that particular issue. But really, at the heart of it is usurping the role of parents. Like the state is not your daddy, full stop. And we're not looking for the state to intervene with our children to help us raise them in that regard. I mean, I guess the public school will be there as a net or a backdrop if parents aren't showing up. But for those of us who are squarely involved in our children's lives and we have a healthy family structure and all that, like we're not looking for that kind of intervention. It's not welcome. And then especially when you're bringing questions of sexuality that border on or cross into body, what is it, dysmorphia.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yeah, and you're dealing with mental health issues. And then here in Washington State, they passed laws that allow this I don't know if it's the schools or the state to, I think it's at the state level, to offer uh surgery,
Gender reassignment. Yep.
yeah, that very Orwellian term, gender reassignment,
Mhm.
surgeries and medications with for minors without the parents' knowledge, without having to. It's like I can't think of any other medical procedure that you can, foist onto children without parents being involved.
Well,
But
think about
that,
how crazy that is. They need a license to drive, right? And they have to be 17 in most places. And then you can't get a tattoo till you're 18, but at 12 you can decide something that's going to change the rest of your life even more significantly than either of those things we just mentioned.
Mhm. And let's talk about how they are painting that argument out too, because they want to label people with these concerns as far right radical or whatever you want to call it. So they attempt to push the goalpost so far that they're so I think it's such a radical state of mind to push that type of thing on children that anyone that doesn't agree with them they have to mirror that thinking and push everything into the far right racist misogynist category. They just hurl these labels at people, and that's how they seem to justify it, is just by pointing fingers and say bad person, you're a bad person for bringing that up, right? It's a strange psychology. It's like an inverted psychology that I find that they use to try to justify these actions.
yeah, and by
Because
doing so, they scare off the timid.
Mhm.
You
yeah,
don't
and
want to be lumped in with that.
there's
That's
really no sane way or rational discussion that you can have about it, because it's a one-sided argument, right? I mean, and that's why you notice when you try and talk with some people, when all they can resort to is calling you names or misogynist or phobic, that it means they don't have a case to back it up. And so the way they're going to do that is they're just going to scream. They're going to use emotion to overwhelm you, because the rational discussion doesn't exist. There's no rational argument and evidence on the other side to support this whatsoever.
The system is masterful at manipulating emotions.
Yes.
And what we've seen these last few years is how masterful they are at hijacking compassion as well.
Yes.
You know, people feel very strong, you know, they're strongly they get emotional about an issue. They want to do the right thing. And I've been down this road many times. I mean, Matt, you know this about me. You haven't met someone who is further ensconced on the left side of the political spectrum as myself for years. And until I had to step back and really look hard at what good was I doing through, my own conduct, or, not taking care of myself, putting it all out there and not checking in with myself. And I was getting sick. I was getting hurt at work, these kind of things. And I'm realizing, like, I'm no good to my family as a father if I'm not able to take care of myself, first and foremost, like put your own oxygen mask on first, that sort of thing. But so I had to realize that I was being led by my own emotion. And that actually happened when Donald Trump, ironically enough, it was when Donald Trump was elected, and I was living in a small town across Puget Sound called Indianola. It's like 3,000 people out there, a lot of liberal-minded progressive people there who I was one of them. And then, but when Trump was elected, all of a sudden, and this one was true for my like East Coast friends, who I still kept in touch with through Facebook and stuff, all of a sudden, within weeks, everybody was writing about how they were sick, how they were getting hurt, how they were drinking all the time, how shitty their life had become. I'm like, wait a minute, the guy's not even inaugurated yet. He's not even the president. And it occurred. And I also hurt myself weightlifting. Like, I gave myself a sciatica pull in my lower back, and I was out for weeks. So it just, I'm walking slowly and I'm just in a lot of pain. It really made me reflect. I'm like, wait a minute, like, I hurt myself because I was angry lifting, and I'm watching all these other people complain about this as well. And I'm like, wait, how much of this are we doing to ourselves? Donald Trump was not responsible for any of this. And so that was kind of the beginning of a period of quiet for me, where I stopped talking so much about everything that I thought I knew and started reflecting. And it was very liberating, because along with that was just kind of like a washing away of like the need to identify with, blue team, red team. And that was actually incredibly liberating for me. And I just was able to look at things with much more of, open eyes and I want to say an open mind, but also very discerning, much more discerning about what I let in, who I let in,
and what's beautiful about that is now you're going to pass that on to your children.
Right.
Whereas before, in the mindset that you were in, you weren't going to be able to provide them the best that they needed. Right. Because you weren't at your best mentally, physically. Right. And that's what negativity does to us. And, I've learned it firsthand. I went through a divorce in 2020, and, it was probably the lowest point in my life. It was, it's a recheck. And at that same time, though, I had to remember there was that one little guy that no matter how much I just wanted to crawl in a hole and do whatever, just avoid everything, I had to be there for him. And I had to show him that no matter what happens, you got to just keep going. There's going to be ups and downs. You're going to hurt. You're going to have joy, but you still have to keep moving forward. You can't just sit there in one spot, because it's going to eat you up. And, being able to share that with them and be there for them, I think is, it's like the old G.I. Joe, knowing is half the battle. Well, just showing up for your children is a huge, especially in this day and age.
Mm-hmm.
Just for them to know that you're there, know that, if they need something, they have someone they can trust and they can call and talk to. Because I mean, like you said, Matt, in the beginning, I coach my son's team and I see it already at 10 and 11. You see some kids who, man, they just have no chance because their parents are lost.
Mm-hmm.
They're not even in this realm. The kid is there, but he's kind of like third priority to them, kind of thing. And it's so sad because that kid is behind the eight ball already in a system where the deck is stacked against them.
Yeah, it's tough to see. It reminds me of as we went through the pandemic, if you could feel the walls of fear closing in around you, to family distancing themselves, friends not answering phone calls for the kids. Kids wanted to have their play dates, but all the parents are sort of succumbing to the fear propaganda that's in the news. And I felt my job as a parent is to keep that fear outside my door and not let that fear enter my door. I used to say it all the time that it won't cross my threshold. Anyone who brings that in my house, they'll know if you're going to peddle fear in here, you're not welcome here, right? And
Good.
so to keep that out of our core, our area that we live together, it was definitely like almost like a fictional oasis that we created, where the kids knew that they didn't have to be afraid of anything. And I think it really strengthened them throughout those couple years. And it allowed them to and be stronger within the school setting and amongst the friends that whose parents were courageous enough to let them play with them, I guess. But that to show them that fear um is the real enemy. Is what we need to resist the most, and not to be ashamed that you're afraid, but to understand what fear is, and understand how it can overcome you, and to find ways of resisting that, and being strong, having a strength of character to, like you said, move forward or to get up if you've fallen. Reminds me of the line from the Batman movie, right? Why do we fall, Bruce? So we can learn to pick ourselves back up, right? So,
Yep.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
And that's so true, especially with the whole. I was in that same boat. I mean, my son and I turned COVID into like whenever it was mentioned, we played like a drinking. It was a laughing game. We just whenever we heard it, we thought it was a joke. And I made sure that there was going to be no fear. And listen, buddy, you have nothing to fear. And it totally changed the perspective on things. At least his outlook on it, because like you said, I see a lot of his friends whose parents succumb to the fear, and those kids are still paying the price for it. They're very timid. They're very afraid to mingle with other kids, and it's a powerful thing. And I mean, just listening to you, Chris, it sounds like you do a great job with your kids, and it's unfortunate, but it's few and far between these days. And that's why when Matthew said, I'd love to have this discussion. This is the kind of talk we need to have, right? We need people to understand how vital it is, especially young boys, to have a strong father figure in their life.
Yeah.
And it's in today's day and age, I can't imagine being a kid and going through it without one.
Yeah. 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 And Chris, I really like the way you described it, as you're not going to allow it across the threshold, because that's what you do with vampires. You do not invite them across the threshold. They cannot enter the house if they're not invited to come through the doorway. And I mean, that really, to me, in my mind, ties back to the type of research that we're doing. And we're looking at like, what happened to these cities? What, who blew up Seattle? Who, all these kind of questions. And it's, we keep bumping against these like really kind of dark and sinister elements of our not too distant past. That, and when I got involved with this, it was a lot of talk about resets from a bygone era. And then, it wasn't long before we were hearing this language of the Great Reset. And we're like, hey, wait a minute, that's the same thing we were talking about for these last 2, 3, 4 years, and all of a sudden they're using the same terms. And it's just like, and then in order to get the population to comply, they ratchet up the fear dramatically, and that's how they get inside in people's minds and control and manipulate them. So I think it's an awesome and powerful thing to say that's not in my home. This is a sacred place, and it's not going to interfere with our family, to the extent that you can. Of course, you have to deal with the world as it is, but to be able to create a sanctuary in your own home. And I think that's what they fear. To get back to the, question from earlier, it's, they see the family structure as an obstruction to, whatever agenda that they have, whatever it is, eating Skittles, the family, strong family unit gets in the way of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you think about it, right, the family is the foundation. Okay. And if you have a strong foundation, you have the roots for a strong building. Well, the building itself is the community. And that's what they've systematically destroyed, right? They've by taking out community first, then going at the family. Now you can't build anything strong. And I think you guys are absolutely right that family is the crucial part, and that's what they fear the most. And that's why, ever since the age of feminism, there has been an attack on the nuclear family.
Yeah, they want to destroy that by any means necessary. And you can see it in pop culture. You can see it over the last several decades. It becomes quite clear. And again, you become what they're terming a misogynist now for if you start to speak out against feminism. When you look into the roots of feminism, you can see the socialist ties to it, and how deep that goes into the nefarious characters that want to have this goal of transforming the earth into their little playground, if you know what I mean. Right? It goes. People don't do the deep research on this stuff. People like us do. That's why we have our channels, so we understand where these movements are originated and where they come from. But people that continue to exist on that surface level, they just want to Netflix and chill. They're taking in all this content that's spoon-fed to them. All that content is laden with all these agendas. Just in the dialogue, the way people interact with each other, and then people emulate those characters in their day-to-day lives, and that's what seems to be breaking up a lot of relationships. And again, it's causing children to question their identity. All of these things are woven into the pop culture of our society, I think.
It's propaganda at its finest, right? I mean, it's pushing an agenda subtly in some instances and over the top in others. I mean, you look at a show like Cuties that made it onto Netflix. I mean, come on. What person in their right mind would say that this is okay? We're going to really glamorize and sexualize young girls in contests. Like, get out of here. But at the same time, it's out there, so you can't just ignore it because it does exist. And I think it's part of our role as fathers is to guide our children on what is this, right? And one of the things that I've always told my son is I will always be honest with you, right? I will give it to you at a level at which you can handle it. I'm not going to, I'm not going to overwhelm him with flat earth and all this other crap. But at the same time, when it came to COVID, I was honest with him. I mean, he was 6 or 7 at the time. And I felt like by being honest with him, being open with him, you earn their trust. And at that point, then we are starting to build something real. And I just think it's I'll go back, I'll say it a million times this episode, the role that we play is so crucial in this world today. Again, going back to that foundation, and that's what we're trying to build. We're trying to build that foundation because it's been destroyed over the last 75 years.
Systematically dismantled.
Yeah.
And I will never apologize for assuming my role as protector, as husband to my wife, as father to my children. I'm their protector, full stop. And if anybody's going to try to get in the way of that, it's going to be hell to pay.
Yep.
Yeah. And they have been systematically going at the family structure from all sides, whether it's, pulling women out of the home. So now there is no center for the children, to go home to. Both parents, and it's like my wife, who I'd probably still identifies as a pretty strong-willed feminist. you know, and I just kind of dropped this on her one time, and I was like, you do realize that when women went out into the workplace, the tax pool doubled.
Mhm.
And she was like, oh, you know, and it just was like, oh
And
yeah.
what did it do to the children, Matthew? Right now, the children had to go to public school, right? A lot of those kids were homeschooled before by their mother, or now they have to go to daycare.
Mm-hmm.
And so now they're
So you're
spending,
paying strangers to raise your children.
you're spending 8, sometimes 10 hours a day
Mm-hmm.
with non-family, right? Whereas in the past you had, generational households where grandparents lived with them, and they would take care or raise in many cultures, that's the way they do it, is that the elders raise the children and the parents go work and do what they have to do. And so that is a huge one, taking the woman out of the household, and just now you are dependent on the system in a sense, because you
And they want
need,
to create dependency over
yes.
again.
Yeah. Well, Matt, you touch on a good one there with the generational households, where we have a society where there's a disconnect between the older generation. Either we put them in homes, or there's like a general societal attitude that I've done my work with kids. I mean, not to call down the grandparents, but there's a general societal attitude that I've done my work with kids, and I don't want to have to deal with that anymore. I'll see the grandkids, um, when I want to, when I can, but there doesn't seem to be a cohesiveness as far as like a learning atmosphere that I can see where they interact with each other and learn from their grandparents. It just seems to be much more limited interaction, and I don't know why that is and why that's happened that
I,
way. But,
I think it stems from the boomers,
mm,
right? Because they went from this, I like to say the old world style where
Mhm.
that living with your parents was okay,
mhm,
to I got to get out of the house, I got to go to college, I got to get away from home, as far away from home as possible, right? And they were worried about the consumerism and the material side of life, and that's where I think the real split started happening, with that mentality that now the American dream is in effect. Everybody owned their own house, their own yard, and it gets rid of this idea of living in uh you know familial estates, and staying around your family, and keeping that generational family going. And now, like you said, Chris, we put them in homes. I mean,
mhm,
what kind of respect is that for the elderly, is to throw them in homes?
mhm. It's an aspect of our society we really need to look at if we're going to have any sort of healing at any deep level. The way that we treat all different ages in our society, really. What we do with people who are having problems, we send them away into, just like we send them into homes when they're old. If people are having mental problems, we don't want to deal with it. We push them away. We put them on pharmaceuticals or whatever. But there's no really holistic approach to solving problems, and it's a separation approach. It's not a coming together approach. It seems,
Mhm.
you know.
Well, and that goes back to the Flexner report, right? In 1910, when they basically outlawed naturopathy. I mean, any natural way of doing things was, now it was termed, what did they call it? Like pseudoscience and things like that. And you had to go the allopathic route to have any certification. And again, I think you're just spot on, Chris, between that and the food. You look
Mhm,
at what they've done to both of them. I mean, 90% of what you find in the grocery store today, you wouldn't have found 50 years ago.
mhm,
And it's not real food. So what does that tell you about things? And that's what I'm having a tough time with my son, is trying to teach him about health, right? And just because the commercial says it's healthy doesn't mean it's really healthy, Oh, but this is orange, No, 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 no. There's no orange in it. It's orange flavoring, buddy. I'm like, you want an orange, you go buy it, you go pick up an orange, you peel it and you eat it. But
mhm,
these other things are they're fake.
mhm. And even
Yeah,
the
that's
oranges are fake too.
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, that's
You-
that, and that's what drives me nuts, right, Chris? I mean, you try so hard to do it the right way, but even when you're doing it the right way, you're still not doing it right.
Yeah, that's a tough one. You can't let it consume you, right? Like we see it. And, yeah, but I don't want you buying Oreos. Put those Oreos back on the shelf. I know what Nabisco is and all that kind of stuff. But at some level, it can drive you crazy.
Mhm.
right? Trying to cut everything out and make sure everything's pure and all that kind of stuff. We know we're under attack, through our water and our air and our food. But at the same time, we're spiritually strong enough, I think, to resist a lot of these things. So that one's a tough one, sort of a push pull on that one,
Yeah, it's finding that balance. And I mean, it is when, like you mentioned, Matt, the what is it, the Flexner report, this stuff goes way back. This agenda was laid out a long time ago. I mean, so when you look at the Rockefeller medicine, the Rockefeller food, the introduction of chemicals into everything, just the dismantling of the old world cities, the laying out of the new electrical grid, the world wars, you could just see everything as an unfoldment, leading up until now. And it's yeah, Chris, sometimes it's just incredibly overwhelming. I find myself there, um not infrequently, probably too often, for my own well-being, like especially just recently, let's talking about kids, with the situation in Maui where you've got, I don't know, 1,500, 2,000 kids that haven't enrolled in school this year, and they're not accounted for, and that kind of thing. So I spent the last week working out a video on that, just to put something out there, try to like give some voice to it, because it's this, so it can be a really helpless feeling, and looking at it as a parent, as a father, and imagining, like, if my kids were missing, man, I I don't know what I'd do. I really don't know what I'd do. Except I know that nothing could get in my way until, I found out about their well-being.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to
So,
take a little more than a black fence to keep me away from searching for my kid.
oh hell yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And so it's like doing the type of research that we're doing, as while raising children as fathers. It really, like, everything to me just came into sharp contrast these last few weeks. Like, this is why I'm doing it. I really want to see it. I want to see a better world. I mourn those buildings that were lost, but really this is about humanity. It's
Yeah.
about elevating our whole condition and getting out of this morass that we're stuck in.
Yeah, I think it's a positive message that we bring to the table when we dig into the old world. Like I always try to say, we're getting away from the whole Darwinian. It was always war, 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 battle, battle, smash each other's skull in to get the upper hand. And we're seeing something that was much more harmonious, that we existed here, at a much higher state of being, a much, you know much kinder, I guess you could say, too, than what we've been told, right? So it's a very positive message, I think, when we do this old world research, um, and that's why I do what I do too. You know,
Now, when you
Absolutely.
guys get into some of the dark stuff, how do you unwind? Because I think that's a big thing for people, because a lot of people go deep in rabbit holes and some of them don't come out, right?
Mhm.
It gets darker and darker and darker until, it's borderline nervous breakdown. So I'm wondering what kind of things you guys do to relieve that feeling of uneasiness you get from doing some of this dark research.
That's a great question, Matt. Chris, you wanna go?
sure. Well, I smoke cigarettes, but I think I know, many people have told me I'm pretty tempered. I'm pretty tempered in the fire. I can stomach a lot.
Mhm.
Um, my wife will tell me that too. I go much further than she can handle, and of course anyone else that we know. Um, so I don't really get too rattled when I go into the deeper stuff. Although I do find again that this research, like the buildings and the architecture, is a catharsis for me. Has been over the last several years, as I went deep down into the trafficking holes and all of those types of things, the whole cabal element and the real darkness of it. I found that this research has really pulled me back up, out of that mindset too, because when you go down those rabbit holes, you can get very angry. You get
Mhm.
very very revenge laden. You want to take revenge out on these people that have done this to us, and and I think this research for me is it has been a big catharsis and a way for me to level off that feeling. So
For myself, since COVID, I started gardening. So I'll, right here I've got a couple of trays of starts, that are going to get cycled out into the garden pretty soon. I just picked some scallop squash that I started a couple months ago, and really, like, I'll go at it hard with this research, like the Lahaina situation, and that one really kept me up at night, and it filtered into my dreamscape, and I was finding myself waking up angry, and I don't smoke cigarettes anymore. So it was like, all right, I just need to turn off the computer, step away from it, go outside on the deck, take some deep breaths, go walk in the garden, hang out with my kids. Really, that's one of the biggest things that grounds me, is just go spend some time with the kids.
yeah, me too.
It's my presence is uplifting for them, but their presence is hugely uplifting for me, and it keeps me grounded. It keeps it keeps perspective for me. I'll tell you a story, Matt. I don't know if I shared with you yet that my involvement with Hurricane Katrina recovery work back in 05, 06, 07. I got really involved with that. And again, that was when I was very much aligned with left-wing politics, but I was representing a national organization of architects and planners. And I formed a hurricane, we called it the Katrina, relief committee or something like this, hurricane task force. That's what it was, Katrina task force. In any case, they flew me down there, and my approach was to representing architects that wanted to do something to help. I said, well, we need to go and meet the community leaders, and we need to find out what the community organizations are trying to achieve, and see how we can plug into that. So that was what I went there, and that was the message I brought. But the thing of it is I didn't have an off switch. I was full throttle, and at this time I had my first son was born. My second one hadn't been born yet, and that marriage didn't last. And in the meantime, I was building a new house for us, or a huge addition on a small farmhouse we bought in Lake City here in North Seattle. And I just went and went and went, and I just gave everything out and put everything. And that was what I was talking about. I hadn't learned to unwind it and do the self-care and do the grounding. It was just like, I just kind of had this, it was just an unhealthy level of giving that. In the end, looking back on it, I can see was plugging a hole that I had. It was actually ultimately was about myself anyway. But I hadn't sorted through that yet. And so I ended up in the hospital, doing full-time job, raising an infant, building a house, and running down to New Orleans and to meetings, a few times a week. I ended up, I had an aneurysm, and I was in they told me I was in the lucky 10% club, where I came out of it pretty much unscathed. It took me a couple months to recover, but I took it to that extreme. And so I had to really learn these lessons the hard way.
But you learned.
But I learned, and I feel like I learned, and I was given the lessons in time to then, unwind some generational patterning, right? That I didn't want to hand that on to my kids, but I was gonna, and I realized, like, shit, I'm gonna, my kids are gonna end up all sorts of screwball if I don't figure this stuff out for myself. Like, I'm a dad now. Like, I have to approach things differently.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Go ahead, Chris.
Let's talk a little bit about like that, the mentality too of our society that, so you talked about the American dream before earlier, how it's really a go, go, go mentality, and it's never enough. And so that if you have a good job, or you're making a lot of money, and you have a comfortable house to live in, it's still not enough. You have to get that second house, or you got to upgrade to a larger house, or you need another vehicle. So you're on the hamster wheel, always chasing, always trying to accumulate more dollars, and you're sacrificing your time with your kids, especially. When I was a contractor, that was a big issue. Like, I work in, I'm a teacher now, and my hours are severely reduced compared to when I was a contractor. And that was my worry, is I was going to miss my kids growing up as I was out there on the tools until 6 o'clock at night trying to finish up contracts or whatever it might be. Right.
Mhm.
So there's our society doesn't really think too much about time. Time is money. They always say time is money, time is money. And we're always continually chasing for more and more, and it's like a social status thing. We're always trying to build our status in society rather than being comfortable with where we're at and prioritizing our time to other things, like spending our time with our children. Or like you said, you coach, Matt, is that right? You
Yeah.
coach baseball. I coach a bit of basketball in the winter here too. So doing those type of things instead of always chasing is, for a lot of people, it's completely foreign concept that I know, and it's something that we need to change as a society, I think, as well. Prioritizing our time. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's part of the indoctrination, right, Chris? I mean, they that go, 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 never enough, that consumer mindset. It's one of the things I like to harp on is natural versus synthetic, right?
Mm.
And what should we be doing naturally? What puts us in contact with nature? What puts us more where we're supposed to be versus what they drown us with on television commercials and
Right.
shows, and what they glamorize in society as successful. And I think they're two different things.
Mhm.
And one of the things that bothers me the most about programming these days is the dumbing down of fathers
Mm.
Right.
and the absence of fathers in these shows. I mean, 95% of the shows, the father's a bumbling idiot,
Yeah.
Mhm.
and it's so disheartening to watch, because it's like, wait, that's not a good representation. But
No, I can.
go ahead.
Oh, I can think of the Al Bundy and the Homer Simpson laying the groundwork for that. Probably even
Yep.
before, but that's where my time sort of starts, right? And it's interesting. So.
My first architecture employer, Jack Lebduska, he was also he just passed away. He was about 90. He was a master architect, and in his office, he hired me out of college straight away in New Jersey, and he used to complain about The Simpsons and the portrayal of dads in media like this. And I would say, oh, it's just all, shits and giggles until I became a dad. Right. And then I was
Wow.
like, oh, wait a minute, and then there's this like expectation set that dads are bumbling idiots or dads are absent or and again that just goes right back to the programming issue and the attacks on the family structure from every angle. And some of it's subtle, some of it's really in your face and blatant. But yeah, so now I look at it. I can still watch The Simpsons with my kids from time and again, but
Me too. Oh
and
yeah.
laugh at it. But and then there's Family Guy, and then you know what I mean, and it's just
Yeah.
like never ending. So at a certain point, it's like, hold on a second, and it's up to us to create better images, better,
Mhm.
put out, elevate the culture. And I guess that's what we're doing here, starting with this conversation.
But yeah, and what term really bothers me is toxic masculinity.
Oh man,
If there
yeah.
isn't a more, just bullshit term out there, it's that one.
Mm.
Because I mean, we
It's
need,
gaslighting.
yeah, oh, absolutely. And I laugh because out here, I've had it thrown in my face a couple times, and I'm like, good, I'll take it as a badge of honor. Thank you. Because that means I'm doing something, I'm standing up. I'm not just cucking to whatever you want and gonna do it your way. This is not about you. This is about what, is best for my child and in my how I see things. And oh man, I see it too often. And on the other side of it though, I see a lot of these dads who are hesitant because of that.
Mhm.
Right.
They act a certain way because they're afraid to be labeled as one of those, or yeah, he's one of those outspoken guys. It's like, no, we need
Yeah.
more of those guys that stand up for what they believe in, not just go with the flow.
Yeah. It's that fear thing, isn't it? That they're controlling through fear. right?
Yep.
Fear of social perception, right? What other people
Mhm.
think just drives, they're banking on us continuing to be afraid of what other people think,
Right.
you know?
And that's just exacerbated by social media, right? I mean, that's the whole point of that, is to get likes, to, it's the little drip of dopamine you get when somebody likes your post or shares it. It's like, no, that's fantasy worlds, and there's nothing real about it.
Yeah. I would say too, the whole pandemic has strengthened my resolve in that regard, where you could have gone one way or another. I feel like that a lot of people had a choice to make. Are you going to succumb to the fear, or are you going to strengthen your resolve, and are you going to choose to stand against this? That seems
Right.
to be where people have chosen one way or the other, you know.
And it was surprising how, how that line divided. It wasn't at all like I would have thought. And like a lot of people that I thought would have really like, taken the right stance were just, no, put your mask on and like, hide away and take this, pharmaceutical like vampire juice. And it's like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
You really? And then other people that I wouldn't have thought were really even like focusing on things were some of the most outspoken. And so that was very surprising for me.
Lost a lot of friends over the pandemic because people
Mhm.
showed their true colors. And it's like, man, those are guys that I thought I wanted in my foxhole.
Yeah.
Man, I learned the hard way that those would not be someone that you want on your side,
They
because
turn on you.
as soon as things got tough, oh man, did they show their true colors. And as soon as they started gaslighting me as to, I'm the bad guy, and
Right.
I'm going to be the one that kills everybody, it's like, okay, yep, time to
Yeah.
move on.
And now
Yeah.
I'm the bad guy for wanting to bring up the last 3 years.
Right. You can't even talk about it.
We
People
don't
don't want to
talk
hear it.
about, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm putting together probably a 2-hour compilation show of just the nonsense of the last couple years from that, just to
Good.
show people how much they were duped, and how, it was orchestrated and it was a coordinated event that was planned, to once it got going, it wasn't going to stop. And you just kept falling for one trick after another. and and it was like all you had to do was rationalize. And that's what disappoints me, because I gave people a lot more credit, and a lot of people showed that they just have no common sense, no real, the Jewish word is chutzpah.
Yeah.
They don't have any balls, so to speak. When
Yeah.
push came to shove, they just fell over.
Yeah, the hardest part I think was family, the immediate family, trying to, you thought, okay, they're going to listen to us if we say it this way. Okay, no, let's change our approach, and let's talk to them about this and this study and how that worked, and trying to find all these avenues to get them before they decide to go through with and then it was very, very difficult for my wife and I to see family members just turn their backs on us and not listen to what we have to say in this regard, because we're not a doctor, or because the TV says so, and
Yeah.
that, and close friends too, but family, because you're still gathering for Thanksgiving and Christmas, but not really, because they had all the restrictions right around the holidays. Um, yeah, so that was a very difficult process to go through, and now we're trying to sort of, like I said, forget all that happened, and that's like a prerequisite for
Yeah.
gathering now. It's like we
Right.
don't talk. It's like the war during World War II. You don't talk about the war.
Yep.
Mhm.
Apparently that was a thing right after World War II. So now it's just like we don't talk about COVID. We don't talk about any of that kind of stuff. It's like, well, a year ago you were telling me I couldn't even enter any establishment without something on my phone, and you were
Right.
fine with that. So
Show me your papers.
Right.
right,
We were this close to just a complete medical tyranny where you had to have that green pass or the COVID pass on your cell phone, like
yeah,
in China, and it is a lot like threading that needle between forgiveness on some level, trying to understand, at least in terms of our loved ones, that their compassion was hijacked and they fell victim, in one way
hmm
or another. But never forget, man.
yeah,
Never ever forget. But being able to hold that and at the same time like allow some healing process to occur, and maybe people aren't ready, maybe they'll never be ready, but it's ironic, isn't it, that here we are talking about family, and then they just dropped this grenade right in the middle of every family across the land.
And
Absolutely.
it affected everybody, right? It was the perfect weapon because it affected everyone. And like I'm not blaming my marriage falling apart on COVID, but that was the final straw, right? That was the nail in the coffin. Was once that happened and lockdowns happened, that was it. It was over. And so it worked on our household in that sense. But I was wondering, how did you deal with it with your children, in the sense that there's all this madness going around, right? They're told to wear a mask when in reality we all know they were ineffective. And other than when they had to wear it at school, my son never, I mean, we would go to stores and get ridiculed and people would get in my face and I wasn't wearing one. How did you rationalize that with them? Because I had I had to deal with that with my son. With a couple of his friends got the injection, and trying to explain to them what was really going on, and so that they were educated enough to not feel like they're doing something wrong, they're being bad, right? Because then we're not doing what everybody else is doing.
Yeah, I mean, it was tricky. It was really tricky because my ex-wife, so I have three boys. The older two are with my ex-wife, and they live with their popo and pawpaw, their Burmese grandparents, and they're elderly, and they were very concerned for them. So they wore masks in their presence and that kind of thing. And plus, their mom was, such a, so strict about it. She wanted so badly to have them juiced, and so that I held I drew that line, and I held that ground, and I was not going to back down. I mean, at one point I actually kind of went overboard, and I actually threatened to move out of state if she kept pushing and that ended up hurting them. And I realized, okay, that's a line too far. So I had to learn that lesson, because I was, I was just creating more anxiety for them. So that was the key, was like, they're my barometer, so the oldest, he, as a junior, and I guess he just graduated, so it was, I'm trying to think if it was into his senior year, but it was mostly his junior year when they went back to school. And he would get in trouble over and over again for pulling his mask down, and he would come home with these stories, and I would just laugh with him. I'm like, so he's getting himself called out by teachers, by the principal, whatever, and I'm like, yeah, good on you, Jacob. And again, it's like that threading the needle of respecting his situation, respecting teachers, and also being willing to speak up for himself and think critically. And so, whereas with the middle son, he was much more fearful, very timid, very shy. He's very tall, so he stands out, and he's, a little bit apprehensive about that, or he had been. And he wanted to wear the mask, and to some point I'm like, what are you doing? And why are you wearing that? You don't have to anymore. And this was after the restrictions were dropped, and he was like, well, I'm uncomfortable with it. A lot of kids are still wearing, we're close to Seattle, so it was like the infection was thick here. A lot of kids are just feel more comfortable with the mask on. I'm like, I look at him in the eye, I'm like, isn't that the worst reason to wear a mask? So you're just saying it has nothing at all to do with protecting people. It's
No health.
and so I said, you can be a leader, amongst your peer group, amongst your friends, by not wearing it, because you're going to teach them that they don't have to be afraid, and just put, kind of like plant those seeds, and then let it percolate, and then and then you see it come from them.
Yeah.
Yeah, to be a bit of a beacon.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I tried to do, was just lead by example, right? And show him that, listen, I'm not afraid. You shouldn't be afraid. We've all gotten sick before, and our body is such a powerful tool that if we listen to it, we will be fine, and it was one of those where with the mask thing, Matthew, I'm in the same boat. My son wore it on his chin more than he wore it over his mouth. And I would have fun with him and be like, okay, well, if the teacher gives you a hard time, just tell her, well, I don't have to wear it at the restaurant when I sit down. So why do I have to do it here? And just, little quips to have fun with it and just give him a
Humor is
little
good.
pushback,
Humor is
but
a
you're
friend.
not being rude. You're just kind of making light of it and just
Mhm.
little things like that, because, it was heavy ostracism, for
Hmm.
something as I say trivial, but it's not trivial, as trying to get fresh air. And that's what I said to him. I said, you ever feel like there's two things? They can't tell you can't get a drink of water. They can't tell you can't go to the bathroom. And if they ever try and do that, you do what you have to do, and then we'll deal with the consequences afterwards. But there's got to be certain limits to what other people can and can't control you on. And I think kids are so indoctrinated to just be obedient and obey that in the long run, I don't think it serves us well. And I think that's part of the reason why we were in what we were in 2020.
Of course, it was a lesson, right? It was a lesson, and if we let that weakness take over, I'll share my story on my experience with that time period too. Because they slow rolled it for the kids here. I don't know how it came out incrementally for you or how it worked, but so I was wearing a mask at work, and I had to weigh the options really carefully as to, do I push back on this, or do I keep my job basically.
Hmm.
But I teach late teens, early 20s people, and I made it clear to them that I did not agree with it whatsoever. Um, but that was for my employment. And then as they sort of brought it on into the schools, because it took about another 6, 8 months before the mandate for everyone publicly trickled into the schools here. It was my oldest son had to wear it for a couple of months, and then my two younger ones were exempt up until grade 3, I think it was. They split the primary school requirement for masking, and uh, and then of course they rolled out right around the time the passports came out. They announced that all school children were going to have to wear it, kindergarten all the way up. We're going to have to be fully masked all day, every day. And for me, that was the straw that broke the camel's back. And I said, no, we're not doing this anymore. And I felt bad for my son wearing the mask for the 2 months, because I'm upfront with them. My kids, they know everything that I'm into, everything that a lot of what I shouldn't say everything, but pretty much everything that I research. They have a pretty firm grasp, but much to the chagrin of my wife, I must say. Sometimes she wishes I would keep a lot of this from them. But so what happened when they mandated that, we were coming close to the date in the schools. I wrote a letter, a pretty strongly worded letter to every single person that works in my children's school, from the principal all the way down to the janitor. They had the list on the website, and made it clear that my kids were exempt from all these COVID measures. And I was expecting a firm pushback, but I got a letter from the vice principal a couple of days later saying, "Okay, your wishes will be respected." And
Wow.
yeah, and my kids were my youngest son was in kindergarten. He was the only kid in his class not to wear a mask all the way through that school year, which is crazy when you think about it, because his face would have been the only face any of his peers would have seen throughout
Wow.
that entire year, you know. And the other two, same thing. I think my daughter had two or three others, because there's a few of my friends that are patriots, I suppose you could say, that have kids in that same school too. And we pushed back, and this was the early days when the convoy started gearing up here, and we really started pushing back up here,
Hmm.
um, until all the measures dropped, I guess, in the spring of 22. But it was my kids they're pretty strong because of the experience they went through, because that's a lot for a young person to stick out like a sore thumb like that.
Yeah, he's very courageous
Oh
for being
yeah.
the only one.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
pretty amazing. Of course, then they
because
had to go.
peer pressure at that age is intense.
Yeah, it is, and they have to be strong and resilient to that, right? And I guess they have to have the tools to push back at it. And yeah, it was and like I said, that's why I didn't really hold back, because I wanted them to have the self-defense when they came at them. I wanted them to say, well, we know that masks don't work, and give them the analogy of, what is it, mosquito flying through a chain link fence,
Right.
or a virus getting through a mask, and all those types of things, right? They know, and it's logic bombs, right? Throw logic bombs on
If you
people.
can smell a fart, virus can get through, right? That was the one my
Yeah,
son loved, and he would use that one all the time because it's just common sense. I mean, think
it's
about it.
funny. And
Yeah.
it's funny.
And
Yeah,
that's what I think a lot of people lost their sense of humor because of the immense fear during
absolutely.
that campaign. So it's like to bring a little levity goes a long way also. And I think that's a big part of fatherhood that people miss is that listen, your kids are sponges. So you have to give them that levity too. You have to bring some enlightenment to their life, make them laugh, make them smile. That's part of our job too, is to we're that dancing monkey, to keep them entertained and keep them on the right track. And I think a lot of parents have lost that because they lost that within themselves, and I think, from this little panel here, I think we're going in the right direction with our approach. But again, there's so many kids that are just paying the price because of the fear of their parents.
Yeah. And humor was definitely an ally and continues to be, and a medicine. And it works because it's when it's true. It works. Humor works when it touches on a truth and it resonates, right? And this is why all the late night talk show hosts are relegated to doing a shitty podcast from their guest room. It's just they're not funny. They're not believable. They don't have any credibility anymore, and it's
Well, they're out
transparent.
of touch, Matthew.
Mm-hmm.
That's the problem. I think this whole mainstream is so out of touch with us, just everyday people that they cater to such a small percentage of the population that is in their base. Whereas in the past, I don't think that was the case as much. I think they went for the broader audience, and I think it's all part of that, like we talked about, the long game. I think
Yeah.
that's what they've been doing.
They chose comfortable lies over uncomfortable truth. That's what I always tell my kids too,
Yep.
right? And all these people around us they wanted comfort, and it was comfortable to go along to get along, right? And that's what they're doing on like these talk show hosts, but they're doing the bidding of their masters, I think, too. All these mainstream,
Well, my
and
favorite clip of all of them is the montage of all the people talking about how dangerous it is to do your own research. Right. And I
Right.
just, I laugh my ass off because, I mean, something as simple as buying a car, right? You're going to research that. You're going to research different options if you have any sort of brain whatsoever. You're going to try and find a good deal. You're trying to find what works best for you. But now all of a sudden, doing that is dangerous, when it comes to things that are involving your health and your well-being. And it's
Jimmy
just,
Dore had a great take on that, right? He said,
yeah,
we used to call that reading,
yeah, yeah,
but they did
yeah,
that too in Hawaii just now in Lahaina.
yeah.
The mayor of Lahaina is like, don't listen to anybody on social media. It's like,
Misinformation, right?
yeah,
That's the new keyword.
yeah. If you don't get it from the official channels, it's misinformation. And yeah, no, it's a very dangerous thing for our elected officials to be putting out there. So yeah, we need to go exactly 180 degrees in the other direction to continue what we're doing.
Well, it's funny because I heard a guy was talking about this the other day, and he said, you Americans are funny. He goes, because he goes, I have a Chinese friend, and he laughs at us. He goes, because you guys believe, some of you believe what's on the television. He goes, everyone over here in China, we all know it's propaganda, and we just ignore it, and we go on with our lives because they're going to spew it no matter what. But you over here let it affect you emotionally and really impact your lives, and not realizing that it is essentially all propaganda, and it's all bought and paid for by corporations.
Well, we don't want to believe that to be true. The people that fall for it, right? It's a willingness, like it's a put your head in the sand sort of especially at this stage in the game.
Yeah.
Like we know their playbook, right? And I think they've cast their net, and individuals like us have sifted through the net, and they knew they weren't going to catch people like us, I think. But there's people still within that net that maybe our message is to say, you don't need to be in that net, because that's all just fear and propaganda. Walk away from that, and there's other places to go. you know, it's much nicer over here, by the way. The sun's out, and you know, get out of that net, because it's not in our best interest that they do any of these things.
But Chris, you can't go out in the sun. It's dangerous. Right? I mean, this is the idiocracy we live in, is that the sun is dangerous. We're going to block it out.
Well, cover yourself with a whole bunch of sunscreen too.
Slather yourself in cancer-causing lotion and go sit out in the sun and fry. Yeah, it's like
it is just fascinating though, like how they turned around and said, "Oh, it's just these weren't orders, these weren't laws, they were just suggestions." You know, when the CDC was getting, you know, finally getting quizzed by the media to the extent that they did, they're like, "Oh no, we weren't." Even Trudeau, you know, was saying this. "Oh no, we didn't make anybody take. You know, it was just all, you know, helpful suggestions." And so what that points directly to is that have courage, have the courage to stand on your own and be the one in the crowd that just turns the other direction. Because that you will get through their net, you know, until they're rolling down the streets with tanks. Like, you know, they told us these were suggestions. So, okay, so next time this comes our way, more people need to take that, you know, take them for their word.
And what did we lose by taking our stance? You know, honestly, I didn't lose anything by standing up for what I believed in.
Yeah, it clarified things. It clarified who's on your side, really.
Yeah. I mean, I had to transfer jobs because I wasn't going to take a forced injection. I mean, it is what it is, right? I mean, but people showed their true colors, and I think that was it's key, because people have to realize that, listen, you don't lose anything by standing up for what you believe is right and what's right for your family. And just because it's not what everybody else is doing doesn't mean you are a bad person. And that's what we were ostracized as. I mean, this was the pandemic of the uninjected, and you know, they were going to kill your grandma and all this, you know, you're taking horse dewormers, and you know, well, and you had late night talk show hosts joking that, you know, if a vaccinated person come in, they should get a bed, and unvaccinated, oh, sorry, you should die. Like, that's how insane things
it was the biggest psychological operation ever inflicted upon the entire human race, or to the extent that media reaches. It's like that, it's a joke, but it's not. Like, they asked the Amish, how come you guys aren't getting COVID? And it's like, because we don't watch TV.
Yeah, it's true though, right?
Yeah.
And it was about health for about 10 minutes, and then it was, in that sense, it was very biblical. It reminded me of the story of us that Jesus is in the desert with the devil, and the devil's tempting Jesus in the desert. I don't know if you're familiar with all that. I grew up Catholic, so I got the Bible in the back of my mind, and the devil says, all this could be yours. All you have to do is take the right. Or they started with burgers and donuts, and then they got to
the French fries,
lotteries.
De Blasio, is it in New York? That's classic clip.
The most cringy clip ever. Yeah, there's a burger component too. Is it too early to have a burger, James? You know, like,
I mean, if I were him, I would just have gone home and hit myself in the nuts for the rest of the night.
Like, maybe he did. Man? Maybe he did. But then it escalated to, well, jobs, right? And again, but that is still a material aspect. I mean, it's an anchor of our lives. We need our jobs to survive, but they're still catering to taking away something that you need. And then eventually it got to be, well, you won't be able to enter a gym, you won't be able to go to a restaurant, you won't be able to put your kids in sports. And it had nothing to do with health at that point whatsoever. Really.
They were attacking our ability to raise our family.
Yes,
absolutely.
Yeah. And remember in the beginning, it was essential workers. Thank you. We love you. And then it got to the point where if essential workers wouldn't follow the medical procedure, then they were vilified. And that spun instantly. And if that didn't show people the true colors of the people running this, I don't know what would. I mean, because now you're saying that, you know, in the peak of all this death, supposedly, we're going to fire the people who are going to save lives because they won't do what we say. So we're willing to risk all of these people's lives just for our cause.
We've got the Washington State ferry system here where these boats keep running aground, keep running into docks, and keep like just having mechanical failures because they got rid of all of this, senior leadership. Either people were taking early retirement or they didn't want to get vaccinated. And so they got fired. Like Washington State was nuts. Washington State was doing their best to follow Canada. And, they're firing first responders when we needed the most. They were firing, firemen, EMT, police officers. And like right now, like this whole story is not over at all. Like it just so happened that while they were locking us down, in addition to 5G towers going up in like, adjacent to the high school stadium, you had our streets are just absolutely flooded with fentanyl.
Yes.
Like flooded. And like Seattle in 3 years has just gone dark, man. I mean, I've always kind of felt like there's a kind of a dark cloud over the city. And I've talked about that in some of my Seattle videos.
Yeah, and that goes back even to like the grunge era, Matthew.
What's that? Yes.
That goes back to like the 90s and the grunge era.
Yeah, well, it goes back to the regrade projects. It goes, I mean,
well, yeah,
it goes back.
Yeah.
Seattle is, it's got issues, man. But now, I mean, everywhere. And my oldest son, he's going to start the firefighter academy in Tacoma. And I told him, whatever you do, don't like, please, I didn't tell him you can't work in Seattle, but I was like, please, like, you're going to be just 80. And I've talked to firefighters in the city, and it's like 85% of their time is spent picking people up from the sidewalks that are just gone.
Now, how do you address that with your kids? My son's
right down the street.
Yeah.
It's right around the corner. It's really hard, man. I don't know. I worry about it all the time. And every day I'm working out my exit strategy, but it's hard to uproot the kids. So just, I don't have a clear answer for that, Matt.
Matthew, that's identical here. We have a zombie apocalypse downtown Prince George now. It's all over BC, actually. The fentanyl, the hunched over people, it's everywhere. That's the thing. It's not just in a couple places. This is an epidemic in our society that's really, again, we don't talk about these things anymore.
No,
we just go along and pretend that everything's fine, just fine.
Right.
It's the opioid wars of 2020s.
Coming the other way. Yeah, because what is it? Greg Carlwood had this guy on who actually knew something, and he was talking about how these chemicals are produced in China and then shipped to Mexico labs somewhere, run by cartels, where they're cooked up into these pills, and then they're just walked across the border by the hundreds of thousands, and they cost $1 a pop. And it's just like,
you're an immigration phobe, I see, huh?
I know. Further evidence of my right wing stuff. It's funny. I went from left and I just stood still where I am. Like I have the same values, but all of a sudden my kids said to me one day, like, "Dad, you're a Republican. I hope you don't vote for Trump again, or again if he runs again." Yeah. I'm like, I've stood still, man. I've held steadfast with my values, and I've just watched things shift around me. But the whole thing, like if we had any sense as a country, we'd be, they know where these things are being cooked. Yep. They've got the sophisticated spyware to sniff out, the chemical plants where these things are being turned into pills and where they're coming across the borders. It's
what we're going to find out, Matthew, is much like the crack epidemic in the 80s, that our government likely has some involvement in this. Specifically, the 3-letter agencies.
Fully.
Sorry, just to say this. Yeah, go ahead, Matt.
No, I just wanted to say with this one point, because I really do. You put it all together, and this is, American, and that includes Canada society, is under assault fully.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're under attack, and it's the Build Back Better, right? That's what this is. It's coordinated. They actually came out and made it clear to us that they are coordinating this attack on.
And what's funny, Chris, about Build Back Better implies that it was dead in a sense, right? That it needed to be built back better, when in reality, the infrastructure was poor. So you're not building back better on that. You have to start with a whole new foundation at that point, and they just want to make patchwork improvements to the existing infrastructure.
Yeah,
In a
but
sense.
it's that globalist rollout, right? The World
Yeah.
Economic Forum
It
and all of
is.
that. It's been made clear as day. I mean, they've
Yeah.
come right out and said it, and they've said it in the mainstream media, which is so mind blowing to me. People call me conspiracy theorist because I talk about the Rockefellers and I talk about Klaus Schwab. It's like it's on your news, you idiots. I mean,
Right.
that's how I feel about it, really.
It's not even hidden in plain sight. It's just in plain sight. Like
That's
you don't
right.
even try to hide it anymore.
Yeah, and then we have to accept it. That's what it is. They put it out in front of you, and you have to be okay with it.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's a corporate hegemonic, one world globalist agenda that anything, whether it's religion, whether it's the family, whether it's the role of fathers, and you can just go down the list of any kind of thing, set of values that stands in the way of kids eating more Skittles, is going to be putting the crosshairs. So
Yeah.
we just have to remain courageous and continue to do what we're doing. And
Well, can we tie this into the research that we do? Because I think it's all having to do with the time that we're living in right now. It's like we are becoming aware of what we truly are, I think, and they are doing everything they possibly can to stop us. All right, and it's not working. I don't think it's working. We know the three of us know we're in this battle. We know we're in this battle, but until you accept that you're in that battle, you're under their grips or under their thumb. All you have to do is step out from under their thumb or get out of that net and say, "Nope, I'm not going along with whatever they're trying to push on us." And all of a sudden, it opens up like a flower, and we start doing the research we're doing, and it's like, wow, it's just we are amazing. This place is amazing, and we can do so much more than they told us. Let's say,
yeah.
Yeah. I call it conscious versus comfort. Right? Because you can either really dig in and go deep into your conscious and feel what's right and wrong. And in the research that we do, a lot of times that's what we go off of too, right? I mean, there's not this mountain of evidence that we have to go in and pick here and there and go really sift through a lot of stuff. We don't have to. I mean, we could live that comfortable life where we go to our job every day. We just eat, watch, consume mainstream television, let our children do what every other kid's doing. And I think that, going that conscious route and being aware of that we have more abilities than what we've been told, that we are more powerful than we've been told, that man has done great things in the past that we haven't been told, and that just because you've only learned X amount of information, there's still mountains more out there that is legitimate. And just because it goes counter narrative doesn't mean that it's wrong. It means, and that's what I struggle with my son with, because he knows, there's some of the stuff that I get into with the podcast and specifically the, alternate history. And he's like, well, why, Dad? Why would they tell us this? Because a lot of times, like we've had talks about Columbus and the discovery of America and the Statue of Liberty and things like that. And I'm not going to blow his, like I said, I'm not going to nitpick with little things, but the bigger things I want him to understand and just take a step back and look at, hey, maybe there's another side to this too, that they're not telling you. And you don't have to understand the why just yet, but eventually it'll come to you. If you understand at least now that there could be the possibility of other sides to the story, that just because someone who is in a position of authority tells you that, yes, this is the way it is and has always been, so that's the way it has to be, doesn't mean you can't go out and research and question on your own.
Yeah.
Well, we're living through the why. I think we are living through the why. Why did they do all this, right?
Yeah.
It all seems to have been set up for this time. That's how it feels to me.
And it's all inversion, right? I mean, it's just inversion, again, of the natural way of life.
Right.
that things are way everything's supposed to be here. It's all synthetic, it's all unnatural, and that's what we've been duped into believing is the right way and the best way for us. When in
Yeah.
reality, it seems more like a prison.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, natural law will ultimately reassert itself.
Yes.
And, we can keep fighting against that, or we could align with it. And along with that, I believe that divine law also will ultimately reassert itself and win out. And, one of the biggest revelations for me doing this research, and this was even before I got into the old world in America research, old world cities and so forth, was the realization, I'm just speaking for myself here, but the realization that Einstein was wrong, Darwin is wrong, like all of these, like the idea that we are disparate objects separated by space is wrong, that getting rid of the ether was a huge historical error, and it's led to no end of problems. And coming around to the idea that the ether is real, and studying, there's just a whole trove of plasma physicists for the last 100 and plus years that have been speaking very, very eloquently to this, and laying out the physics behind plasma. And I'm not going to try not to get too far afield here, but that plasma makes up like 99.9 whatever percent of all matter is plasma. It's it's called the fourth state, but it's really the essential state of matter, and that everything else is a derivative. Ken Wheeler calls matter hard light, when I just love that as a metaphor. But I put all that out there to say, for me, it was this aha, like science and spirituality are not antithetical. They're two sides of a coin, and they're completely, dependent upon one another. And, as somebody who was raised Catholic and went to church every Sunday for, until I left school for college, and then had 2 years of, wrestling with these ideas, and then came out on the side of atheism because I was so smart, right? And then spent 20 years as a devout atheist to come back around. And I know that many people share this story. But then to have actual physics to back this up was like, this is awesome, man. And then that just dovetailed, and everything just started to click into place when I look back at these old world buildings, and I'm like, they worked the way they did because their builders understood this. They understood how to use atmospheric energy and create a circuit between heaven and earth to power a building, whether it's to heat it or to as a energy resonator, as a healing device, go down the list, whatever it is. And then when you look at them, it's like they're so awesome to look at because they reflect this consciousness. And so for me,
sacred geometry of it all, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just like, I saw everything. I just see everything through new eyes now. And it's very incredibly empowering.
Well, we're slaying sacred cows, like you mentioned, Einstein and Darwin, and you can go down the list. We slayed a sacred cow, H. Richardson, in the video that we did, right?
Yes, you did.
But that's what we're all doing. It's like we're questioning these figures that we're not supposed to question, the ones that we have statues and books made, in our history books. And then we start to realize how coordinated a lot of this stuff is, right? And how they've laid out these figures for us and laid out the storyline for us. That's how I sort of see it. I think it's much more coordinated down through time, by these nefarious organizations, and I point to them a lot in my videos, right? But secretive organizations, let's say. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. I love that quote, John F. Kennedy, right? And we don't need any of it. We don't need any of it anymore.
They're all parasites. They feed off our energy, and that's all they are. Without us, they need us as their worker ants. We are the subjects of this, and it's not supposed to be that way.
And all we need to do is realize that they have us in that state, and I think their game is up, right? It's like the bottom of the pyramid. All we have to do is stand up, right?
Yeah,
And everything
or the
collapses.
Bugs Life movie, right? Where they're
Yeah,
saying, don't let these ants know, because once they realize that they outnumber us, they'll just take us over easily.
Yeah.
yeah,
And that's where we're at. We are powerful, but we've been told that we are dependent, that we're weak, that they're here to protect us, and without them, we're nothing. We're gonna die.
yeah.
And people they use that fear of death out there heavily on people, which
Mhm,
is another kind of psyop in itself, that
mhm.
to constantly put people in this state of fear and
Mhm.
darkness. It's a powerful tool.
Well,
Imagine, go ahead, Chris.
that sort of links in with the lack of spirituality, right? The
Yeah.
materialism.
Yeah.
Yes.
They've
I was just,
separated us from spirit. Yeah,
yes.
you go ahead, Matthew.
Yeah, no, I was going to say the same thing. Imagine convincing people that when they die, it's fade to black.
Yep.
That would be terrifying,
Mhm,
and I don't know what happens after I die. I have this idea that, like, when you start to die, time changes where a moment is in an infinity. And like that idea of that, your people who have had near death experiences recount seeing their entire life in an instant. But if that instant keeps narrowing down, but the opposite is also true, where time expands outward
mhm,
forever,
mhm,
who knows what that is,
mhm.
right? Who knows? And is there an afterlife, and what does that look like, and all those things? Maybe that's the greatest adventure of all, and is
Yeah,
nothing to fear.
Yeah.
yeah, and I think, yeah, and it's sort of, I think, the word God and the word good are so close to each other, and that's like you mentioned. You're coming back to spirituality after 20 years of being an atheist. I can relate to that in a similar fashion, and it really happened to me at the beginning of COVID, where I had to make the conscious decision to choose good over evil or God over the devil. And
Mm.
and people misunderstand me and they think I'm getting religious on them. They don't, and that's a trap too. Religion was used as a trap in that regard as well. They used the horrors of religions to turn people away from the concept of God and good, which I think are the same thing. All you have to choose is the side of good, which is the side of God. I think, and there's no religion attached to that. There's no organized religion attached to that for me.
Yeah.
So I don't.
Yeah, and I'm in the same boat as you all. One of the things that I'll never forget, when I was going through my divorce with my ex, she said, one of the things she said to me, she goes, "I don't even know who you are anymore. You read the Bible." And I was like, okay, that's all I needed to hear right there,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
it wasn't that I was reading it to become a devout Christian. It was for the stories,
You're
for
reading the book.
the understanding of it. There's something in here powerful that people find in here. Well, maybe I can find what I need in here, and hear what I need to hear at this time. And I think spirituality is a huge tool for us, to weaponize ourselves with, because
Mm,
it's about that soul
Yeah.
connection. It's
Yeah.
it's
yeah.
about more than just this physical consumer realm. It's a deeper connection to the natural ways.
Hmm.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
soul. You mentioned soul. Yeah,
Mhm. To
yeah.
go back to the COVID thing, it's the fact that they made our children stand 6 feet apart proves that it's a spiritual war.
Yes.
Hmm.
Right there, that we were not allowed to, like our energy fields would infect one another.
Yep.
Hmm.
That's the Darwinian, the disparate objects separated by space, manifested.
Hmm.
And that's the other thing, is like, this is it has become very clear that it's a spiritual war.
Hmm.
um yeah, sorry, it'll come back to me.
Well, I was going to say it's not just six, but six, six, and six. Six in front of
mm,
you, six on the sides. I laid that out for my students actually when the lockdowns first came to. Like the
mm,
symbolism was all over this thing, right? And really, really obvious. And it's also, I'm going to survive this and you're not. I'm going to squirrel myself away here and you're going to go out there and you're going to die of this horrible disease. Instead of, interacting with people, having a conversation, hugging people, all these things, it's like, who can survive this? We don't need each other to survive this. We're gonna turn our backs on each other, and whoever makes it makes it. You know,
Right.
really
And even if
tested our
you make
spirituality.
it, if you don't follow our guidelines, you are a pariah, right?
Yeah.
Then we wish that you didn't make it. That was the whole mind game
Right.
of it all, was that you know, it wasn't about survival. It was about survival in following certain guidelines.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, like Jimmy Kimmel actually said that out loud on late night, TV. If you don't comply, we don't care if you live or die.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. There
You
was
know,
a bunch of headlines as well, newspaper headlines, a
Yeah.
couple major,
I
newspapers.
remember what I was going to say was just one of the biggest tells, and going back to the question of spirituality versus religion. It doesn't have to be versus, but in this case, the fact that churches complied
Mm-hmm.
really continues to disturb me. And they could sit there and these spiritual leaders were watching pot shops stay open, right? Because that's essential. But
Mm-hmm.
the churches complied and closed down.
That was part of the agenda though, right, Matthew? I mean, again,
Oh
it's
yeah,
that disconnect.
yeah,
It's they had, and from a church's perspective, they're all 501c3, so they had a financial incentive to obey,
right.
right?
Yes.
That was the biggest thing. They could have
Mm.
said, no, we're not, we're opening our doors, and some did, right?
Some
And
did.
they
Yep.
and they were ridiculed up, down, and sideways, but at least you could tell that they stood for something.
There was a minister in Canada that really stood his ground
Yep.
and got arrested.
Pablo, I can't remember his last name. Kind of
Yeah,
embarrassed that I don't remember him, but he really stood up to the jackboots coming in. He's Polish, I think.
Polish. Yeah, I think I remember.
Artur Pedlowski, I think, from Alberta.
Uh-huh.
He's some very powerful videos of him standing up to the police as they approached his church. Yeah, he's still battling. He's still battling a lot
Well,
of
and
battle.
if you go back to the church, what's amazing is a lot of people fail to understand that confession was just the precursor to like the CIA, the OSS, groups like
Totally.
that. They
Oh
would
yeah.
get blackmail on you, and that's how they would get all the news of the goings on. So they knew they had all the cards in their favor, and then they would hold the God card against you
Mm.
to get you to confess these things, because they were the conduit, right? They were the connection that you needed.
Mm.
And just thinking about that scam, I was like, wow, it never hit me until, a couple of years ago when I really started looking at things with different lenses, that wow, it's amazing the coordinated effort by these organizations.
They
Mm.
hijacked spirituality. They hijacked our good intentions. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what's sad, because a lot of people don't have the conviction that the three of us have, and that's why and I didn't know I had it in me until I was pushed to it,
Mm-hmm.
because I had been just like everybody else. I was, trying to, I went to college, wanted to get a job afterwards, wanted to buy a house, wanted to have a kid, wanted to have cars and have a nice property and all this. And it was all the material stuff. And the more I accumulated, I was like, oh, this is great. Things are going well. And then when reality set in, 2020 hits and all that is thrown up in the air, you realize what is truly important and what
Mm-hmm.
truly matters to you. And all of a sudden, all my possessions went away for the most part. I got it down to a small little U-Haul, and I felt so much lighter at the same time. It was this cleansing of burdensome. It's like you carry all that stuff on your back and you don't even think about it, that it's just stuff in the end. And that what really matters is us, our relationships with people, our
Yeah.
connections with fellow man, and our beliefs in, whatever it may be. Is it a higher power, or whatever religion you follow? As
Right.
if you're steadfast in your beliefs, so be it.
Yeah. You can't take all the stuff with you in the end. You
Nope.
know, it's just what's in your heart that you.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. Oof. Wild times, to say the least.
Well, yeah, and I don't know. Are they going to try and squeeze us into another 2020? What do you think's coming on the horizon here?
Well, it's
I'm hearing
amazing how
whispers.
it happens right around these election cycles, Chris. I mean, these viruses, they're so smart. Like they just come at the right time to benefit a certain group. And
I
man,
wonder. I wonder if it's just they're sending up trial balloons, seeing if they can. But there's been so much pushback, and like I told my wife the other day, I was like, I'm not going to get riled up this time. Like I'm susceptible to fall prey to that, um,
Yeah.
because you're apprehensive after having been through it. It's a little bit of shock trauma, but
yeah, but
I
what can
kind of,
you do, right?
huh?
What can you do yourself to stop it, right? And there's
Just
nothing
not
that
just
one
not
person,
comply.
yeah. So
Just
that's why, like, you have to kind of keep it in perspective too, and that's why I love your new perspective on it. Is that listen, I know even if it comes, I have to still
yeah.
stick
No,
to my
absolutely.
guns.
Even but yeah, just not comply, full stop. But I'm not going to get riled up about it because and I'm starting to see this on the right too, where some like Alex Jones has the whistleblower, and then all of a sudden everybody's like going, "Holy shit, they're coming back with it!" And it's like, but then Donald Tucker, not Donald Tucker, he's a politician from Newark, Tucker Carlson,
Yeah.
um, he's like, "No, they're not," and he just said this the other day, and it was interesting to hear it coming from somebody of with his platform. He's like, "No, they've already played themselves out. Like they've exposed themselves. A critical mass of people are not going to go for it." But then what he said was actually, a little more sinister, which is, I mean, he said either if Trump looks like he's going, prevailing in the polls as we're heading to the election, they're either going to take him out or they're going to start a hot war with Russia directly because they just whatever he represents to them, they cannot have it.
Or
Yeah.
China, right? They keep dangling that China uh potential out there too with Taiwan.
Taiwan. Yeah. Yeah.
They've drawn that fake red line there. So I wouldn't put it
So
past them, Matthew, but
I
at the
wouldn't
same
either.
time, what is
But
it you know, again, it's not going to touch our front door, right?
yeah.
That's the thing. It's like you said before, Chris, it's not going past this threshold.
Yeah.
I'm going to hold my ground steadfast that in my household, it will not have it doesn't matter. You can tell me whatever you want to tell me. I'm sticking to my guns.
Yeah. And that's the strength of character that's required. It's like looking at the world for what it is, as it is, squarely, and then not allowing all that to infiltrate. Like I can't talk to my wife about this stuff. Like this is incredibly cathartic for me to be able to talk to you, you fellas about this because, it's just, living in Seattle, there's just not a lot of people I can bounce this stuff off of. So we need this. We need,
Hmm.
Thinking that this is somewhat magic
Mm.
that they're performing. Do you think that by them putting it out there, they're trying to get it going, so to speak, and put it out there so that they can get it on people's tongues, whether they're gonna, like you
Sure.
said, it's just
Oh
throwing
yeah.
out air
They're
balloons.
seeding consciousness. They're
Yes.
seeding it in the consciousness for sure. And
Yeah, it's
I've told some
spellcasting.
friends of mine that, yeah, spellcasting for sure. I've had friends that, and I told them if it comes back, and they're terrified because, like I said, most people I know are in the don't talk about it phase. Well, if it
Mm-hmm.
comes back, we're talking about it again. But this
Mm-hmm.
is your shot at redemption, folks.
Yes.
I'm talking to everybody out there who complied completely the first time. Do not comply. This is your shot to redeem yourself, I think.
You have to draw a line, right? Everyone has to draw a line and you have to hold fast because Jordan Peterson talks about it. And you keep backpedaling and eventually your back's against the wall and there's nowhere left to go and it's just you and them. And if you drew that line and you pushed back, 100 yards ago, you still got 100 yards worth of fight in you. And I think that's key for a lot of people is to just draw a line to what you are comfortable with. And if that line is crossed, you must push back, as uncomfortable as that may be, and I, to be honest, I didn't want to cause a scene. I had to move to a new town. I'm from Connecticut and that's where my family was, we were living. And then my ex took my son up to Massachusetts to be with her parents. And so I needed to be near my son. So I'm in a new town. I don't know anybody, and I'm not here to, be that guy. But at the same time, I'm not willing to let them run roughshod on my son, and that's the line that I drew. And as uncomfortable as it was for me to really push back against the school system the first time, because it's really not in my nature to challenge them that much. Mm-hmm. And then it was like, okay, well, but this is different. This isn't just them teaching him, a certain thing. This is a mindset, and this can go on for have a long-lasting effect on them. Mm-hmm. So, everyone needs to just figure out what is that line for yourself, and what are you going to do when they approach? Are you going to push back? Or are you going to concede?
Right. And Chris, I like your idea that there's redemption. There's an opportunity, because we've seen enough. Mm-hmm. If you're paying attention at all, we've seen enough.
Yes. They've lied to us up, down. And think about it this way. I mean, if the government was your wife, right? How many times can she lie to you before you just have no trust in her whatsoever? And you're like, this is done. I don't want any part of this anymore. Mm-hmm. Right. And that's what they've done to us for the past, hundreds of years, but in more recent time, the last 5 years, they have just ramped it up and lied over and over, and then told us that we were the ones that were spreading misinformation. Mm-hmm. For, again, being dangerous and doing some research and looking outside their little box and their little prism and going to outside sources, which so many people have to do. And one of the things that I say to everyone is, if you can go to old bookstores, find books from the 1800s, or go online and find PDFs from pre-World War I and read those and read about a different world than we're in right now. And things were much different back then, and you can still find proof of it, but you have to get outside the mainstream history books and go look at source documents and things like that. And you will find stuff that will absolutely blow your mind.
I think the beast is flailing right now. I think I think we've actually delivered the death blow already. And but as the beast is flailing, it'd be a very dangerous time. That's how I've heard a few people use those types of analogies, and I think they've never been more exposed as they are right now. They've never been in such a panic mode that they've tried so hard to censor us, but we're still here. Yep. Tried so hard to bury all of this, but new waves of awakened people come along and pick up the torch of the people that get buried. So I think it's only a matter of time, but it doesn't mean we sit around and do nothing and just hope the beast dies. We have to be a part of that process, I think, of delivering that final, the beast is twitching, so we just need to turn the spear and end it. I think humanity, it's our time for sure.
Yeah.
Right.
So. Yeah. As like toxic as the internet and social media and all that could be, and how it's, weaponized to affect the minds of our children and that kind of thing. It's, it's a double-edged sword that we're able to wield to have these kinds of conversation and put this kind of information out and compare notes and say, oh, you notice this in your town? I noticed this in my town. Like, wow, a whole new image is emerging. But it took like a YouTube platform for, to be able to actually curate and sort through a lost history, and so it could get to a point where it's just too uncomfortable for them to have all this information out there, so they pull the plug. Yep. But then they'd be doing us a favor anyway, because we know enough. And so then we'd get rid of the toxic shit from the social media and spend more time with our kids.
Win-win, right? It's a win-win.
It's a win-win. Yeah. And I guess that, to your point, and I really like that we've already won.
Yeah, and I think the internet got away from them, right? I mean, they thought it was going to be this great control tool, when in reality, it's been a great awakening tool. I hate to use that term, but a lot of people have found things that they never would have looked for before because of the resources on the internet. Yeah. And I think it has exposed tremendous holes in their system, and the trail right? In the past, they could say whatever they wanted and then flip-flop on it. Well, now we can hold them accountable, and we can show, people like Fauci saying in 2005 that natural immunity is better than any injection you could ever get. But then in 2020, he says, no, this overrides natural immunity, which, now you can hold them to task and say, well, hold on.
Yeah.
You said this before. Why are you saying this now? And
Yeah.
I think it's a powerful tool for us if we use it in the right way and aren't distracted by, the little things and are because I think there's a lot of that sent out there too.
Yeah. And I think that to what you're saying, Matt, about, the power of the internet, I have to believe that this is an example of the divine law asserting itself. There's a very powerful medium of communication, and there's a higher truth, a higher principle that's emerging through it. And that's not by accident.
No, and our ability to connect like this, like there's no way I would have met Matthew and Matt from the States. I would have to driven through there, set up my tent trailer, and driven into Seattle and bumped into you in a coffee shop. But we don't have to do it though. Yeah, it could have happened. It could have happened. But it's unbelievable that the fact that we're able to connect like this, it's a unique time on our timeline that we know of anyway. I don't really know exactly what history is, but it's a real advantage we have, is our ability to connect with like minds, and I think when we connect like this too, it's like the sum is always greater than the parts.
Yes.
It's like, what is it? There's a word for that, symbiotic or symbiosis. Yeah. So that's how it feels, right? It's like all of a sudden I'm able to clarify a thought because you guys are clarifying your thoughts, and it just sort of comes together and becomes more powerful than it would have been if it was just me rambling in a live show, to myself or whatever it might be.
Right.
Yeah, you feed off each other's energy, which is a very powerful thing. And especially when it comes to thoughts, right? And discussions, I think we open up so many possibilities and so many, like portals almost for people to think, use your brain in a way that you wouldn't have pre-internet. We were just consumed the television and mindless stuff. Now you can go get valid and great information and meet these people, right? I mean, Matthew and I don't know how we ever connected, right? But it happened, and it's been beautiful. I'm so thankful to have met people like you all, because it is not only reassured me that I'm not insane, as so many people have called me, but that also what we're doing has a purpose. There is a point to us doing this, and the time that we invest is not just wasted. Because I've had that debate with myself on numerous occasions. Why am I doing this? Right? Why am I putting all of this time and energy and effort into this when I could be doing other stuff?
Well, Matt, I heard you say that you were born in New Jersey. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. See, well, yeah, we find each other. So
yeah,
again, one way or another.
What do they call? Are you New Jerseyites or New Jerseyans? What is that?
I don't even know what you call us.
Jersey. Yeah. I don't know.
The armpit of America.
Is that what it is?
Forgot about it.
Yeah.
Well, and I imagine that both you may want to get back to your families, but so maybe we can start winding this down. But I want to make this final point for myself is what's become so clear for me is in these last few years is the difference between groupthink, like of the hive mind ilk, and a conscious collection of enlightened individuals who have done their work, right, and are aligned with higher principles, and like coming together as we are, and you can feel we can feel the high vibration, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's what I said. Our paths cross. I mean, I've drawn inspiration from some of our talks, right? I mean, that's which I'm not going to get just talking to someone in my local little area, right? I mean, it's a powerful thing. And, I'm with you. I really feel like I feed off of other creators' energy.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
especially when you find the right mesh of people, again, like you guys said, what are the chances that the three of us ever meet?
yeah.
Right? I mean, it's so minuscule, but
It's the law
coming
of
to
attraction.
yeah,
Yeah.
but coming together like this is such a powerful thing. I mean, this has been just an outstanding discussion that I think a lot of people can benefit from, and it's positive.
Yeah,
Right, in this time when you can dwell on all the negative things and all of the, the sky is falling and they're poisoning this, they're poisoning. No, I mean, you can still live in this. You just have to find the right people, find your people.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we provide pathways for each other as we get together, and maybe you're feeling a little bit stalled in one area of your research or one of your interest areas, and all of a sudden, an idea, Matthew will say something, and all of a sudden that'll spark an idea in my mind, and it totally syncs, right? We get all these synchronicities in this research that we're
right.
helping each other with to help each other along the path and giving each other other options to explore by the little tidbits of knowledge that we've accumulated in our research, in
Yeah.
our lives.
Yeah,
And,
isn't it
and
wild? I'm sure you guys have experienced this where you figure something out, you study this thing, you put these pieces together, and then you hear somebody else present just that set of ideas, and it's just like that validation. It's like I'm onto something.
Hmm.
I was gonna say that same. It's like you have receptors, right?
Mm,
And those once you put them out there, it's gonna start sucking in anything that's like that. And all of a sudden, yeah, like you said, I can't tell you how many times I've been researching a subject, and then all of a sudden, up on my phone pops a notification. So and so just did a video on the same thing I'm researching. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
this is great. Let's go check it out. And okay, good. Yep. And it inspires me to keep pushing on with my research and finish my product so that I can put my spin out there.
yeah, yeah, it's symbiotic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
connections, right? It's yeah, it's a
The
lot of fun
energetic
too.
realm.
It's also a lot of fun. I really enjoy the old world research. I got to tell you.
Oh,
I
there's
re-
it's like a drug, Chris. I mean, it's one of those things where you get into it and it hooks you.
yeah.
It's so enticing and there's so many angles, right? I mean,
Hmm.
we all do old world research, but you look at our catalogs and we've all hit some very different areas on
Yeah.
the journey.
Yeah. Yeah. And it might even be the same place we focus on.
Yes.
And it's just like, wow, there's so much to dig up, and you could do a whole other um, set of research on the same place and get all sorts of, like, I get so much amazing feedback from viewers that are from the area that grew up in the. I had one guy, he's like a custodian for the high schools. I can't remember where it was. And he's like, I got the keys to all these high schools and I go underground and there's tunnels everywhere. And it's just like, wow, I'm getting so much more perspective on these places I've never been,
Right.
just by putting these little videos out with me just on my screen with just talking about buildings,
Yeah.
so it's pretty funny.
I'm meeting with a woman tomorrow at Carkeek Park, which is in North Seattle on Puget Sound. And she said she's shown me pictures. She's found melted bricks down there that she's convinced are from the 1889 fire.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, she reached out to me and it's like, hey, I got some melted bricks to show you.
And that's what it's all about, right?
Mhm.
Yes, it's connecting the dots, right? That's the way I look at it. I love it. And especially when you can find others, like you said before, Chris, I get no more pleasure than when one of my, viewers or someone comes back with some really relevant information. And it's like, okay, good. I'm not just doing this so I'm in an echo chamber. There's actually other people out there who can validate this.
Yeah, validation was the word I had in my mind too. Yeah,
Yep.
validating our research for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, this has been an outstanding conversation. Thank you very much. This is real. This is the most fun I've had since I started doing this. And I needed to connect with other men, other fathers like yourselves. And I didn't know we were going to end up talking about COVID so much, but I think we needed to. So, this is important stuff. And it's also important that that it elevates us, that it uplifts our spirit, and that we have fun doing it. So thank you for that perspective, both of you.
Yeah, thank you both, Matt. It's nice to meet you. This is our first time conversing, so we
You
have
as
to do it
well.
again.
Yeah,
We'll
I'd
definitely do
love
it again.
to.
Yeah, and we should do one based on the old world maybe next time we get together. We'll leave the virus talk out of it.
Oh,
Let's do
sure.
it.
Yeah. Pick a subject, any subject. Let's
Yeah.
roll.
Yeah.
Right.
I am in. There's nothing that I enjoy more than Old World, and especially hearing, perspectives like you all. It's so amazing. I was into history growing up, but now I'm learning like real history and alternative history, and it's just got me captivated.
Hmm.
Yeah. It's electric.
Yes.
Literally.
So should we wrap it up here?
Let's do it.
Sounds
All right,
good.
gentlemen, we will do this again, and we'll figure out that old world topic and bore down into it. And I look forward to the next time we get to talk.
Yeah. And Chris, where can everybody find your stuff?
I'm on YouTube, Old World Exploration. And I just started a Rumble actually, where I'm doing a few more interviews these days that are maybe a little too hot for YouTube. I think maybe too hot for YouTube. I don't know what their standards are these days, but those are the two places. I'm also on Instagram under Old World Exploration as well. So pretty straightforward.
Excellent. Guys, go check out Chris's great work.
Thank you.
See, Matt, that's why you're the professional here.
Oh,
I forget to do all the marketing stuff.
It was twofold, because I wanted, not only do I want people to go check him out, but I wanted to make sure I'm not missing anything that he does either. So, because I follow your YouTube, and it's like, okay, some guys have like you do a Rumble where they put alternate material, because I know I put maybe 5% of my stuff on YouTube because I'm just so sick of getting strikes for nonsense.
Mm.
Well, Matt, where is your stuff? Where can we find you?
You can find
Yes.
everything Great Deception podcast, the Great Deception podcast. And, I do have, like I said, I have a YouTube channel. My main spot is my patron page. And I put all the videos out there for my show, my Monday Night Master Debaters show. And then I started this summer adding old books. So I got about a little over 50 old books from 1800s, early 1900s, some even older than that, out there that are relevant to topics I'm researching. So a lot of the times when I do research and I find a cool book, I'll share it with my patrons, or if somebody outside of the Patreon wants it, they can always just DM me on Instagram, and I will unlock it or send you the PDF too. So
Yeah, dude.
I'm not here to hide information from anybody. Anybody that wants it, I will be more than happy to send it to you. Because I think that's part of this key to what we talked about tonight, is the information sharing and giving everybody the tools they need to be able to, I know this is a fatherhood episode, that we can be good leaders, be good men. And I think it's huge.
Yeah,
So,
dude, your Patreon account is amazing. It's just a trove of knowledge, and it's the best value in this business, really. I encourage anybody to go and subscribe to your Patreon account, and just to be able to avail themselves of the vast wealth of knowledge that's held there.
Awesome.
Good work,
appreciate
Matt.
that.
Yeah.
And Matthew, where are you?
Well, I'm at Marvelous Old World, strictly on YouTube, simply because I don't have the bandwidth to figure out Spotify, and I'm terrible at self-promotion. So I just put my research videos together and I, upload them to YouTube. I've managed to get that far, and it's working so far. I haven't had any strikes or anything from, any of my content, but maybe I'm not big enough to pay attention to yet. So we'll see how that goes in time. My architecture work is at dreamdesignbuild.org, and Instagram at Yurt Designs. So that's where my work is. And check it out. Thank you again, fellas. Thank you very much for an amazing conversation.
Been a pleasure.
Thank you, guys.